where black people are not welcomed. From hidden prejudices to outright discrimination, some destinations can make black travelers feel anything but safe. You might expect a warm welcome when exploring new cultures. But for some, the reality can be far different. In this video, we're not just talking about subtle racial biases or awkward stares. We're talking about serious racial tensions, anti-black sentiment, and even places where travel warnings for black people are a must. If you've ever wondered which countries have hostile environments or where black travelers may face racism, you've come to the right place. We'll also be sharing insights on countries black people should avoid and what you need to know to stay safe abroad. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around to see the full list. This might change your travel plans. So sit back, relax, and get ready for the shocking truth. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on travel tips. Number 1. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia may be known for its wealth and rich history, but when it comes to welcoming black people, things take a sharp turn. In fact, 70% of labor disputes in the country involve black workers, many of whom come from African nations to work as part of the large migrant labor force. The kingdom has been widely criticized for its treatment of black laborers, who often face harsh working conditions and rampant racial discrimination. It's no secret that Saudi Arabia's strict cultural laws make it hard for many foreigners to adjust. But for black travelers, the situation can be even more uncomfortable. The racial bias doesn't just affect migrant workers, it extends to black visitors and expatriates who frequently encounter subtle and sometimes not so subtle prejudice. For example, many black people report being treated with suspicion or even hostility in public spaces, which makes everyday activities like shopping or dining out feel more like navigating a social minefield. And don't even get us started on the stares. Yes, the "I've never seen someone like you" stare is all too common. But let's be clear. Saudi Arabia's unwelcoming attitude toward black people isn't just a modern issue. Historically, racial hierarchies have existed in the region, influenced by the slave trade and long-standing cultural norms. Though progress is being made in some areas, systemic issues still make it one of the countries black travelers may want to avoid. So if you're planning a trip to the kingdom, pack your patience and maybe a thick skin, because it's not exactly the warmest place for black visitors. Number 2. Japan. Japan, the land of cutting-edge technology, mouth-watering sushi, and cherry blossoms, has plenty to offer. But when it comes to embracing diversity, the country has some serious catching up to do. In fact, 45% of black expatriates living in Japan report experiencing racial bias. Whether it's being stared at on public transport or feeling like an outsider in social settings, subtle exclusion is a common experience for black people in Japan. The lack of racial diversity makes it challenging for black travelers to feel truly welcome. And it's no wonder Japan ranks high on the list of countries black people might want to avoid. But it's not just the day-to-day interactions that cause discomfort. The media in Japan doesn't exactly help matters. Negative stereotypes about black people are still perpetuated in television shows, advertisements, and even cartoons. It's not uncommon to see blackface still used in Japanese media, a shocking reality for many first-time visitors. This reinforces outdated and offensive views, making black travelers feel more alienated. Historically, Japan has been a largely homogeneous society, and while it's opening up to foreign influences, the acceptance of racial diversity has been slow. For black people, this can translate into microaggressions and overt racism, whether they're shopping, dining, or just trying to enjoy Japan's famous tourist attractions. So while Japan's high-tech gadgets and iconic landmarks might be tempting, its lack of diversity and racial bias make it one of the top 10 countries where black people are not welcomed. If you're planning a trip, be prepared to navigate more than just the language barrier. As always, approach with an open mind, and maybe pack a bit of extra patience. Number 3. India. India, with its vibrant culture, rich history, and stunning landmarks, is a bucket list destination for many travelers. But for black visitors, India presents unique challenges that can make their stay far from comfortable. Colorism in India runs deep, and a staggering 62% of black expatriates report facing racial discrimination. It's not just limited to uncomfortable stares. Unwelcoming comments, or worse, are all too common for black travelers in India. This deeply rooted bias has its origins in India's long history of colonialism, where lighter skin was often associated with higher status. Unfortunately, these outdated ideas still persist, and Black people often find themselves on the receiving end of this bias. Whether you're walking through bustling markets or visiting the famous Taj Mahal, don't be surprised if you feel like an exhibit on display. And yes, you'll get those "did you just step off a UFO?" stares from locals who may have never encountered a Black person before. Beyond the stares and comments, Black travelers in India can also face more serious issues like being treated with suspicion or even denied service in some establishments. While India's diverse culture is a draw for many, its struggle with accepting darker skin makes it one of the countries Black people might want to avoid when planning their next trip. So if you're considering India, keep in mind that exploring this beautiful country can come with its own set of challenges. India's deep-seated colorism and racial bias place it firmly on the list of the top 10 countries where Black people are not welcomed. Approach your trip with an open mind and perhaps a thick skin. Number 4. South Korea. South Korea, home to K-pop, cutting-edge technology, and delicious BBQ, has become an increasingly popular destination for tourists. However, if you're a Black traveler, navigating this highly homogeneous society can be a bit like being the only dish at a buffet that no one wants to try. Standing out as a foreigner in South Korea is already challenging, but being Black is even tougher. A staggering 55% of Black expatriates in South Korea reported facing racial discrimination. Whether it's being turned away from a taxi or enduring endless stares, many Black people find themselves feeling out of place. The situation isn't helped by South Korean media, which has a long history of portraying Black people in a negative light. Whether it's outdated stereotypes or insensitive depictions, Black travelers can find themselves misrepresented or misunderstood. These portrayals only reinforce prejudices, making everyday interactions feel awkward or unwelcoming. Historically, South Korea's lack of racial diversity meant that foreigners, especially Black people, were a rare sight, and while the country is becoming more open to global influences, old attitudes die hard. Black travelers often report that even simple activities like grocery shopping or visiting tourist sites can feel isolating, as locals may stare or avoid interaction altogether. If you're thinking of visiting South Korea, brace yourself for a mix of excitement and frustration. While the country has plenty to offer, from its rich culture to its vibrant nightlife, racial biases and cultural misunderstandings still make it one of the top 10 countries where Black people are not welcomed. Pack your sense of humor. You're going to need it. Number 5. Israel. Israel, a country often admired for its rich history and religious significance, is also a place where complex ethnic and racial dynamics create a difficult environment for Black people, particularly African immigrants. In 2023, racial incidents targeting African immigrants rose by 30%, shining a light on the challenges Black individuals face here. For many Black travelers, Israel can feel unwelcoming, as they navigate a society where they're often viewed with suspicion. Black people in Israel, especially those from African countries, report facing discrimination not just in daily interactions, but also in more institutionalized forms, such as housing and employment. The tension between different ethnic groups in Israel is nothing new, but the rise in hostility toward Black immigrants has made it one of the countries Black people might want to avoid. Even in casual settings, Black visitors might experience uncomfortable stares or feel out of place, like you're a rare Pokemon in a world full of Pidgeys. For Black travelers, visiting Israel can be a challenging experience as the racial issues extend beyond just minor inconveniences. Whether it's trying to find accommodation or simply blending in, the deep-seated prejudices can make everyday activities a real struggle. Despite Israel's rich culture and historical significance, it's unfortunately earned its spot on the list of top 10 countries where Black people are not welcomed. Stay tuned. You won't believe what comes next on this eye-opening list. If you're finding this list surprising, just wait. We're only halfway through. These challenges are real, and it's important to stay informed as a traveler. If you're enjoying this content, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Virtual Travel by Brian for more eye-opening travel insights. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on tips that can make your next trip safer and more enjoyable. Number 6. Ukraine. Ukraine may boast a rich cultural heritage and beautiful landscapes, but when it comes to racial tolerance, it's not exactly at the top of the list. In fact, Ukraine has been ranked as one of the least racially tolerant countries in Europe, making it a difficult destination for Black travelers. A particularly alarming trend involves African students reporting incidents where they were denied entry to buses and trains. Imagine trying to catch a ride, only to find out that the train has left the station, but not for you. This lack of diversity and frequent racial discrimination creates a chilly reception for Black visitors, often making them feel unwelcome. Whether it's walking down the street or trying to access public transportation, Black people in Ukraine may find themselves on the receiving end of hostile treatment. The country's homogeneity and limited exposure to different cultures have contributed to a reputation that Black people, and even other minorities, find hard to ignore. While Ukraine has a lot to offer in terms of history and architecture, Black travelers might want to think twice before booking that ticket. Between the subtle and sometimes not-so-subtle racism, it's no surprise Ukraine makes the cut in our top 10 countries where Black people are not welcomed. If you plan to visit, just be prepared. Riding the train might require more than just a ticket. Number 7. Greece. Greece may be famous for its ancient ruins, stunning islands, and delicious gyros, but for Black travelers, it's not all sunshine and history. Racial tensions in Greece have escalated in recent years, particularly following the migration crisis. This rise in tensions has hit African migrants the hardest, many of whom report facing hostility, especially in areas outside the main tourist spots. If you're wandering through Athens's picturesque neighborhoods, you might feel safe enough, but venture further out, and the story changes. Black travelers frequently report feeling unwelcome, and many describe experiencing outright racism. The situation isn't just about uncomfortable stares. Incidents of verbal abuse and even physical confrontations have been on the rise. According to reports, these racial tensions are not just isolated incidents but are part of a broader issue that's been growing since the influx of migrants from Africa and the Middle East. Unfortunately, these problems mean that Black travelers often feel like they're walking on eggshells when exploring parts of Greece. As much as you might want to soak in the beauty of Santorini or the historical marvels of the Parthenon, you might also find yourself dodging some less than friendly vibes. While Greece is a dream destination for many, it has certainly earned its place on the top 10 countries where Black people are not welcomed. So if you're thinking of visiting, be sure to stick to the touristy areas, unless you're in the mood for more drama than a Greek tragedy. Number 8. Italy. Italy, the land of pizza, pasta, and incredible art, might seem like a dreamy destination, but for Black travelers, the experience can be less than bellissimo. While the country is renowned for its history and culture, it has unfortunately experienced a 35% rise in racially motivated crimes, particularly targeting African immigrants. This alarming statistic highlights a growing problem with racism in Italy, making it one of the countries Black people should avoid if safety is a top priority. The prejudice isn't just confined to immigrants either. Black travelers often report feeling unwelcome in public spaces, from restaurants to shopping areas. You might be sipping your cappuccino in a charming cafe, but don't be surprised if you notice some cold stares along with your hot drink. Even walking through famous tourist spots like the Colosseum or the canals of Venice, Black visitors have reported uncomfortable encounters, ranging from microaggressions to outright hostility. Italy's racial tensions are rooted in both its recent political climate and its history of immigration. Many African immigrants have settled in Italy over the years, which has led to a rise in xenophobia and racial discrimination. Sadly, these issues have spilled over to affect Black tourists as well, who may experience similar mistreatment. Though Italy has much to offer in terms of beauty and history, the rise in racial incidents has secured its place in the top 10 countries where Black people are not welcomed. If you're planning a trip, pack your sense of adventure and maybe a little extra patience, because you might face more than just tourist crowds. Number 9. China. China's transformation into a global economic powerhouse is nothing short of astonishing. But despite all its progress, some things haven't changed, like the deep-seated racial biases that still exist in the country. For Black travelers, China can be a challenging destination. African expatriates and Black visitors regularly report facing discriminatory behavior, from constant stares to more troubling forms of harassment. If you think getting stared at in public is awkward, try being treated like a walking spectacle wherever you go. It's an unfortunate reality for many Black visitors in China. The issue largely stems from cultural misunderstandings and a lack of exposure to diversity. Despite China's growing role on the global stage, the country remains relatively homogeneous, especially outside of major cities like Beijing or Shanghai. This has led to an environment where Black people are often seen as an oddity, with stereotypes and misinformation fueling the bias. For example, it's not uncommon for Black people to be denied service in some establishments or treated with open suspicion, especially in more rural areas. Even though China has made efforts to foster international relations, particularly with African nations, these connections haven't necessarily translated into everyday social acceptance. As a result, Black travelers often feel uncomfortable and unwelcome, making China one of the countries Black people should think twice about visiting. Whether you're admiring the Great Wall or navigating the bustling streets of Shanghai, the cultural gap and lack of diversity can make China a difficult place for Black visitors. It's no surprise, then, that China lands on our list of the top 10 countries where Black people are not welcomed. If you're heading there, be prepared for more than just culture shock. You might get more attention than you'd ever wanted. Number 10. Russia. Finally, we arrive at Russia, a country that, despite its rich cultural history and iconic landmarks like the Kremlin and Red Square, has a long-standing problem with racism. For Black travelers, Russia can be particularly unwelcoming. Incidents of racial slurs, harassment, and even physical violence are not uncommon. In fact, surveys have shown that racial discrimination against Black people in Russia is widespread, with African immigrants and Black visitors often reporting aggressive encounters. In major cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg, Black travelers might find themselves subjected to suspicious looks or offensive comments, but the situation can be much worse in smaller towns, where diversity is even rarer. Unfortunately, the presence of far-right nationalist groups has contributed to an environment where Black people may feel unsafe just walking down the street. There have been reports of racially motivated attacks, particularly on African students and tourists, further reinforcing Russia's reputation as one of the countries Black people should avoid. While Russia's contributions to art, literature, and history are world-renowned, its systemic issues with racism make it a tough destination for Black travelers. Even with all the beautiful sights to see, from the majestic Hermitage Museum to the Trans-Siberian Railway, the underlying tension can turn an exciting trip into a stressful experience. With racial tensions running high and incidents of discrimination on the rise, it's no surprise that Russia makes our list of the top 10 countries where Black people are not welcomed. If you're heading to Russia, consider packing more than just your winter coat. You'll need some extra layers of patience and caution to navigate this complex cultural landscape. And there you have it, the top 10 countries where Black people are not welcomed. While every travel experience is unique, it's important to be aware of the challenges that Black travelers may face in certain parts of the world. Remember, this video isn't meant to discourage travel, but to prepare and inform. After all, knowing where you might encounter difficulties can help you better navigate your journey and make safer, more informed choices. If you found this video helpful or eye-opening, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more travel insights from Virtual Travel by Brian. And if you've had personal experiences in any of these countries or have tips for fellow travelers, drop them in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and as always, safe travels.